Good morning. Hello. There you go. Buenos días. Hola. Bueno, ¿tengo que hablar en español o en inglés? Se da la casualidad de que Stefan entiende perfectamente el español, pero ha preferido presentar en inglés. Sin embargo, quien quiera preguntarle después cosas en español, pues no hay ningún problema, ¿vale? All right then. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sebastian Rinken. I'm glad to present this seminar today, which will present the GESIS panel, a public research infrastructure probability-based survey panel that's working in Germany for 10 years already. And Stefan Potzke, one of the managers of that infrastructure, he will explain to us how it came about, how it's being run, and the service this provides to the German social research community. So this is pretty much the envy of all of us in the room who lack such an infrastructure in Spain, for example. So it's very interesting to see how they came to enjoy this privilege and how they manage it. We'll have a 45-minute presentation roughly, and then we'll have the debate. Stefan is a long-time friend of mine, and I'm very glad he joined us today to explain this to us. He's been working at GESIS for many years already. He's a specialist in migration research, but he's also a specialist in methodology, and the combination is very interesting indeed. So thanks, Stefan, for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you all for coming, and of course, thank you very much for the nice invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, actually to be back here. First of all, before I start the presentation, being a German, I of course like to correct people. So the first thing I want to do is I want to correct my good friend Sebastian. We do not just serve the German scientific community. Our aim actually is to serve the broader European, if not even global scientific community. So you are all invited to use our data and to use our infrastructure for that matter. And I'm gonna come to that during the course of my presentation. So today, as Sebastian already said, I'm going to present the GESIS panel as an open data collection infrastructure to you. And I'm gonna not spend much more time with the title. This is what I have in mind specifically. So I'm gonna give you a brief overview before I go into details so that you can appreciate the details a bit more with a kind of background information already. Then I'm gonna talk mainly about the GESIS Panel.pop population sample, and you're gonna see in a minute what I mean by that. Go into a lot of detail there, because that's what Sebastian asked me to focus on, understandably. But if there is still time, and I hope so, I'm gonna spend 2 or 3 minutes after that also on the GESIS Panel.dbd digital behavioral data sample before coming to my conclusion in summary. And with that in mind, let's just start right ahead. So what, and importantly, who is the GESIS panel? Let's start with the what. So we are an open data collection infrastructure as the GESIS panel. The GESIS panel as such has been founded, has been created in 2013. We consist now of 2 samples. The first one is the GESIS Panel.pop population sample. This is actually what had been established in 2013 and had been called GESIS Panel until 2 years ago, but we now rebranded it as we have now a second sample as well, which is the GESIS Panel.dbd digital behavioral data sample, established in 2022, and we entered the normal regular work in 2023 which we did to add this also with the POP, GB POP, as we call it, in 2014. So what is our mission? We allow researchers to collect their own high-quality survey data. With the GESIS Panel.pop, we focus on survey data, probability-based and mixed mode survey data, to be more specific. With the GESIS Panel.dbd, our aim is actually to provide linked survey data with behavioral digital data, for example, web tracking. This is the data collection part, but apart from that, we have, of course, also the mission to provide our data as such to then a broader community. So there's primary research, of course, but also secondary research. We are also part of the Open Probability-Based Panel Alliance. Maybe I'm gonna tell you shortly something about them, that if not, you can ask me later on if you are interested. We do also survey methodological consulting. So, for example, we consult other researchers, international researchers, but also in Germany, regarding methodological issues, among other things, when establishing a panel survey. And being a research institute, or actually also GESIS is an infrastructural institute, but we also do research, in our case, of course, focused on survey methodology. That was the what, and now to the who. We have subdivisions in our team. So we are a team within the larger GESIS organization. The team is led by Bernd Weiss. And then we have different working groups, let's call it that, for lack of a better term. And those are still the working groups established with the GESIS panel population sample, which is why the DBD panel is here as an extra group, but our aim is over the next 2-3 years to integrate both samples. What do these groups now mean? So we have the first one here on the slide, which is survey data management and quality assurance. That is basically field control and post-field work. So data cleaning, this type of stuff. We have survey project management. That is at the beginning end. So this is taking care of the questionnaire construction, of submission management, and so on and so forth. We have marketing, which is quite clear, I think, and panel management, which is also very important, and I'm gonna talk about that a bit more later on. We get some IT support. We have, thankfully, we have student assistants who help us out a lot, of course, and there is third-party funded projects that we run and to do. So that was very quickly what and who we are. Again, I was asked to focus on the population sample, so the probability-based sample. That is what I'm going to do. So, what is the GESIS panel population sample in detail? With regard to survey design and fielding, we are a self-administered mixed mode survey, meaning we collect data not only online, but also using a postal mode. Roughly 1/4 of our participants use the letter. We send, for every wave, invitation letters to all participants, so online and offline. The online participants, of course, get, in addition to that, an email invitation. We use prepaid unconditional incentives. For €5 are sent, so €5 bills actually are sent with each invitation letter. We use reminders, but only for the online participants, so they get 2 email reminders. We have a mobile first design, unified design. If you're interested, I can tell you later on what that means. We now run 4 waves per year. We used to run 6 waves up until and including 2020. And the data collection period as such is 2 months. So importantly, I mentioned that we are an infrastructure. So what does this actually mean? This becomes apparent when you look at the wave composition. So for most panel studies, the waves consist of predetermined questionnaires, that with good reason, VPIs of those projects come up with, or the institutions. So they have their set questionnaires. We are very different in this regard, because our questionnaires consist mostly of submitted studies. They take up between 15 and 20 minutes, and then of 5 to 7 minutes of what we call longitudinal core studies, which cover your basics. So this is stuff which is, and then we run most of them annually, which is needed for a lot of analysis as control variables and stuff like that, or simply aspects that you want to have regular data on to contextualize whatever else data you collect with us. And you have the topics here. So there are socio-demographic updates. There are questions on political participation and attitudes. So this, our submitters, our users do not have to take care of. That is data that we collect already. And of course, then we have in every wave items that allow us to monitor the survey quality. So what are the advantages of using the population sample of the GESIS panel? This has two parts in terms of longitudinal or cross-sectional data collection. We are available for academic non-commercial research, and we also usually free of charge. I come to the usually or the asterisk part later on. But this means researchers can collect data with us without having to organize, manage, or finance their data collection. We provide a high quality probability-based sample. We do mixed mode data collection, which is not, which is increasingly something extraordinary nowadays, when most of data collection is shifting to online, or a lot, not most. We leave our primary research is a free choice of topics and instruments. Of course, we have a framework, but within that, people are free to choose what they want to focus on. And also, primary researchers can, of course, build on all, and they are supposed to build on all the instruments and data that has been collected before. So, and there are a lot of niche topics besides mainstream topics, and I'm gonna show you some examples later on. And then besides the data collection, we have the data use part, again, free and available for the academic research. The data set is highly diverse in terms of topics. It goes back quite some time by now. So as of now, we have collected, or we have published rather 58 waves fielded between 2013 and 2014. There's no embargo. And as I already said, there are regular updates on specific topics. And maybe here at this point, I refer back to my correcting Sebastian before. So I invite all of you also, of course, to submit modules to collect data with us and to use our data. So all the documentation is in English. Our submission documents are in English. The only thing, of course, if you submit something to us at some point, you will have to translate your instruments to German.
And
but
collect our data in German. And collect our data in German.
Yeah, sure. So it's data collected on a German population. That is for sure. But depending on your research question, that can still be very interesting, I would say. But I'm biased. Okay. Second point, recruitment and sampling. So again, I try to be brief here. So we built on, or we are a randomized access panel of individuals, so not households, as opposed to the GSEP, for example, which you might know. Our target population is the German-speaking population in Germany. We only survey permanent residents, which in this case does actually not not relate to the resident status. So since there are also migration scholars in the room, permanent residence here means really just people living in Germany, meaning we drop them also from the panel the moment they leave Germany. And it doesn't matter whether they are German or not for that, right? With our initial cohort, we sampled people 18 to 70. Later on, with refreshments, we dropped the upper age limit. The sampling frame is the German population register. We tried to keep our sample size at about 5,000 respondents, more in a minute. And also very important is that we actually exclude people who did not participate 3 times in a row. So then go out. So how did the recruitment process work? As I said, or I didn't say that, but I think it's clear. So the people of interest are the residential population of Germany. Then in 2013, probability sample was drawn, and you have the case numbers here. I'm not going to read them out. The second stage then is, of course, the question how many people participated. So these were about 7,600 people who participated in our recruitment interviews, face-to-face recruitment interviews, I should say. Of them, 6,210 agreed to participate in the panel. Were then invited to a profile survey. And then in the end, 5,900 roughly started to became active panel members, started to participate in the panel. And more on that you can read in our reference paper, which you have here on the slide. So, as I said, we try to keep people to keep our number of participants at about 5,000. This logically means as people move away, get tired of participating in the survey, or unfortunately die. Of course, over time, the sample that we survey diminishes, becomes smaller. So we need refreshments, right? We need to recruit new people. How do we go about that? So we had our first refreshment in 2016, and what we did here, and actually also in all other refreshments we had after that so far, is we used an approach that is called piggybacking. Basically, it means that we ask people after they have taken another survey that usually is also run by GESIS, whether they would like to participate in the GESIS panel as well, right? And we did this in 2016 with the German General Social Survey, the ALBUS. And the ALBUS itself interviewed 3,500 people. Of those, 1,700 became panelists in the GESIS panel. So they did not just agree to participate, they also did, right? And as I said before, that was also the moment when we gave up our upper age limit because ALBUS doesn't have it. We did pretty much the same thing again in 2018 with the ALBUS. Again, we recruited 1,500 new people, and this was still all face-to-face interviews, so pretty much the same procedure as for our initial cohort. Then our third refreshment in 2021, we shifted actually from ALBUS to the ISSP, which also meant that we shifted from face-to-face interviews to self-administered interviews. In this case, we recruited 760 new panelists. And then the last refreshment we did so far in 2023, we used the ESS, which allowed us again to go to face-to-face interviews, and we ended up with 1,122 new panelists. And currently, I have the pleasure to be in charge of organizing the next refreshment. Again, we will do this year together with ESS to get new panelists. And this is what our participant numbers look like over time. So you see here, we are pretty stable, not too much attrition, but again, as I said, over time, of course, you need more people. And I could now ask whether you see something odd, but I will not, because you have already seen what is odd here. And this is that one, actually. Yeah, so that was what I feared. Can I move that?
It's COVID, right?
Yeah, so we actually, with the start of COVID, we did a specific data collection. So colleagues of mine put a lot of effort in that, consulted health research experts and other international experts to put together a survey really on short term, which we ran already in March 2020, but only to our online participants. And then, however, after that, many of the key instruments of that became part of our usual questionnaires, of our waves over the. We also have a constant information over time on COVID-19 up to a certain point. I'm going to come to that later. So study submission, that would be the next issue I would like to talk to you. So how does this work? How do get people studies in with us? So first of all, we have different study types, two main types. The first one are what we call regular submissions. So those take up to 5 minutes. There is a lot of documentation you need to provide as well. So you need to send us basically a research proposal stating your hypotheses, of course, also mentioning your instruments, doing a literature review and all that. And you already get from that putting that together takes a lot of time. So we also have another possibility, the so-called short submissions, to allow you to collect data either on a recent issue, so where you think, okay, I need data, but I need it fast. I don't have time to put together the larger proposal. Or if you say, okay, most of the data I need is already in there. You collect a lot of data. I just need those 1 or 2 extra questions, and then I can run my analysis. So for that, we have short submissions. You get about 1 minute, which means, or which corresponds to roughly 5 short single choice questions, or the other options on there. I'm not going to read them out. They can, of course, also be combined, but the key issue here is no more than 1 minute by our measurement, by the way. So you cannot just tell us that's just 1 minute, even though these are 25 questions, right? So besides those 2 regular or 2 main data sets, we have then, or not data sets, sorry, I misspoke, study types. We also have 2 additional things. One is, and I start with the last one, is OPA again, the Open Probability-Based Panel Alliance. So basically, we join forces with the LIST panel and the Understanding America study, and you can run the same survey instruments in all 3 panels if you want, but that costs money. We cannot do that for free. And the other thing is, if you submit a grant proposal for a third-party funded project, and you intend to collect your data with us, of course, you will need to be able to tell the funding agency, if this proposal gets funded, I can collect my data, which then logically in turn means we need to block a spot in a specific way for you. And that's again the moment at which it's not free anymore. Then it's still not a lot of money, but that happens. So what type of studies do we field? Roughly speaking, without going into too much details, only academic projects. You cannot do any cohort or subsample studies. So that's a rule. Whatever you do should, in theory, all people should be able to reply to your questions. Of course, some things will be more relevant to one respondent than to another. That's natural. But you cannot tell us, for example, I just am interested in people over 50, something like that. That would not work. We do not do highly sensitive questions. Again, we reserve the right to judge where this group begins. There are no submission deadlines, so you can submit your stuff whenever you want to us. And we have a really comprehensive documentation, which you find on the website behind this QR code. So, study design options. What type of designs do we field? If we think about different waves that happens over time, we have, of course, single wave studies that you can do. So cross-sectional designs where you just collect data at one point in time, right? Pretty obvious. But being a panel, we, of course, do longitudinal studies, which means you can then have either multiple cross-sectional design, basically asking different questions in different waves, or you have a panel design asking the same or largely the same questions in different waves, right? And we also allow for experimental designs with the limitation that we only do 4 split marks, tops, not more than that. And the reason for that is our paper questioning. So we cannot split our sample in, say, 8 or 16 experimental groups, because this would mean you would have to send out 16 different questionnaire versions, which we simply cannot do. So, yeah, that's pretty obvious. I think I'm not going to read out that Sebastian is going to share the slides later on. So those are some points that indicate what a successful submission looks like. And here, I rather want to summarize again the differences between the irregular and short submission. So the first one is the length. And then the other important point here is the external peer review, which again makes the short submission much faster, because there is only an internal review by us, whereas for the regular submission, we have an external review process, pretty much like for a journal article. And this is what that looks like. So we have a 2-stage submission process. And I should mention that most people interested in collecting data with us actually contact us beforehand. They send us an email or something, or contact us via our contact form, stating their general idea, asking, would this in general work for the GESIS panel? Then we say yes or no. And if the answer is yes, they fill in a first submission document that allows us to do an internal review. They get feedback. Then they have to fill in the regular submission stage 2 document, which then is much more comprehensive with all the information I mentioned before. And this is what is sent out to a double-blind peer review, the result of which is, again, pretty similar to what you would have with a journal article. So accepted with minor revision, or you have to rewrite the whole thing, or occasionally we reject still proposals at this stage, but our acceptance rate is very high, and maybe on first sight shockingly high. We accept more than 80% of the studies submitted to us. But again, this is also due to the fact that most people send us an email beforehand. So most of the topics that we would not field do never do it even, or do never even get to a stage 1 submission. Then, of course, after review, the study is finalized and we go into wave preparation and data collection, to which I come. So here, just for fun, because numbers and figures are always nice to see, here I plotted our the submitted studies we have so far fielded till the end of 2024. You see, we have by now over 90 regular submissions. We have quite a number of short submissions. We have a nice number of longitudinal submissions, but also the majority is still cross-sectional. Yeah, I don't have to say much more on that. It was just to scientific presentation in social science should have some numbers. So that's what that is. So here is now a short selection of the topics we have fielded, and it's really, you saw the numbers before, a short selection. But I wanted to point out one of the main selling points of our infrastructure that I already mentioned. You will find data with us that you will not find with others, or you can collect data with us that others will not allow you to collect because it doesn't match their survey program. So, of course, we have, if we look at substantive on submissions with substantive focus, we have your usual things, attitudes, political political topics like European solidarity and so on and so forth. But we also have studies or had studies on breastfeeding attitudes, oral hygiene and the relation to quality of life, and actually also body art, which is the social and individual predictors of doing body. There are questions in there on how many tattoos do people have, or how many piercings do people have. And so if you always wondered how tattoos translate into political attitudes, we are here for you. We have the data you need. Just come ask us, or better yet, have a look in our study description, right? And then, of course, we have studies that have a methodological focus on questions of gender language, scale-level experiments, and so on and so forth. Again, I'm not going to read that out, but I recommend if you have a train ride or something in the next days, just download our documentation and have it. So now I need a short breather and actually also to take a bit of water, short commercial break. I give you a second to read this, and then I'm going to tell you something about it. So late last year, we published a call, which is still open. That's why I'm showing it here, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of our the start of our regular data collection in 2014. And we thought to celebrate that, we give people the option actually to submit longer modules of 10 minutes instead of just 5. And this is why I have it here in the slides. In these slides, this call is actually still open until the end of May. So if you want to submit something, you can do it. And again, you find the call behind this QR code. Okay, data access. I think we are still doing more or less good on time. So how about the data sets that we offer? So we have the standard edition, which is our standard scientific use file, contains the cumulative data set, including the data of all waves, obviously, but also a demographic data set. So this is a reduced data set with specific demographic variables like gender, age, and so on and so forth, which allows you to get a very quick overview of sample composition aspects and also of certain changes. And this is distributed for download via the GESIS archive, right? Of course, you have to fill in a paper documentation, what is the purpose of your analysis, and so on and so forth. So there are data security classes, but you can practically, or not practically, once accepted, you can download the data directly. But then we also have what we call the extended edition, which is all of the before plus more sensitive variables. And this one you can only use in our secure data centers. So that's a good excuse to visit either Cologne or Mannheim, right? Additional data sets are the data on COVID-19 that I mentioned before. So this special survey with only the online participants, that's actually a public use file. So again, you have to access it via our data archive, but it has a much lower data security rating, so it's easier to access. And we also have a campus file. If you're teaching, then you can use this. It is a reduced file, And again, I'm not going to read that out. If you're interested, you can have a look later on in the slides. Also important for data usage is, as I mentioned already, everything happens via our data archive. Our data is delivered in wide formats, InstData and SPSS. And these are here in code specific data sets that you can then merge, and we also provide syntax to do that. There is a comprehensive data manual behind yet another QR code, and we also have a cheat sheet which is on here, which gives you a first idea on how our data is structured and helps you to find your way around our data. So, organizational aspects. How are we doing what we're doing? Okay, this looks a lot, but let me try to work you through that thing. We have divided this into inputs, internal process, and output. So what goes in is what I already talked about, right? So it's the submissions, regular and short submission, upper submission, GEDI submissions, which go through a review process, be it internal or external, and then we have our core studies, right? So then we take, or the preparation of each wave takes about 3 months. And here I'm talking really from 3 months, starting at the point at which it is clear what is going into the questionnaire, right? The first step then obviously is to prepare the questionnaire. This is done online first. Then there is, of course, a feedback and revision phase, after which the paper questionnaire is prepared. And of course, that is simplifying a lot. There are a lot more steps, right? But those are the main points. We have to hand over then our materials to our mail service provider, who, by the way, is really just that. It's a great company we work with. They do great work, but they are not your standard service provider for a survey, because they do not, they are not in charge of data collection in the traditional sense. They really just send out our questionnaires, our invitations, and all that. So nothing else. They have nothing to do with sampling or anything like that. We send our materials, as I said, and then, of course, we have to update the addresses, which is exactly a point of the before mentioned differentiation to field institutes. We are in charge of our panelist data bank, and we tell them, okay, some people dropped out, you don't need to send them a letter anymore. 3 months for that. Then 2 months for fielding, of course, consisting of field control. There it starts with the sending of the invitation, and then, of course, online reminders will be handled during this time. And then we have post-processing. Again, this is about 2 months, data preparation, quality checks, documentation, and archiving. And of course, with the exception of the fielding period, those things overlap, right? So while post-processing for wave A, the first wave in a year, is still going on, there is already the preparation of wave B going on, right? And also at the same time, this is why I put that here below, panel management is happening, so participant support, the submission management is happening, so what is here in the output column, and also data user support, what is in the input column, sorry, data support in the output column. I'm gonna come to that in a second. We also have to do some marketing, and on top of that, we have to do also the refreshments, so a lot of stuff to do. What comes out is, of course, our data publications, which we aim to have every 3 months, consisting of the aforementioned data files, of very comprehensive documentation, wave reports, codebook, study description, and so on and so forth. And of course, also our research, including PhD projects of our PhD scholars. Panel management. I really want to spend some time on that, because that's I put here also known as every panel's secret weapon, but I should have said also not known, because nobody really knows a lot about this and thinks about this, but panel management is really, really important. So, of course, for a panel, and I think that's obvious, it's essential to have a good relation with panel participants. We want a long-term relationship with our participants. We want them to continue to participate. So, and to maintain and secure this relationship is the main task of our panel management. That is one colleague in our team who is responsible for that. So that's a person panelists can contact to change their address, to voice questions or complaints about data collection, or what happens often, people tell us that they didn't receive money, so someone has to take care of that. So panel management, in short, is the
Okay, hello now.
Okay. So thank you again. Hopefully online now you can hear me again. I'm gonna repeat I'm gonna try that phrase a third time. So the panel management represents the interest of panelists to the team. And I started to say that sometimes as scientists we get carried away, we have our fancy ideas what we want to do. And then someone who is closer to reality needs to tell us, no, our participants are not gonna like this, they're gonna call me all the time and they're gonna complain. So that is really important. And our panel management can be reached 24/7. Of course, not that colleague who is working for us, but we have basically a secretary service, kind of a call center, who takes calls, emails whenever she is whenever she cannot be reached, right? All the contacts are documented and coded, and this is actually what that working paper is about. Unfortunately, that is, I think, the only working paper not in English that we have ever published. But it's really interesting. So, but nowadays with machine learning, we will not have a problem to read it in Spanish. And of course, you might now say, but participants commenting on what is going on, isn't that what open fields in the survey are for? Yes and no. Because, of course, there are stuff that we never want participants to enter in an open field. For example, if they change their address or something like that, right? So you need another contact point. But also, and this is just something that I took out of this paper, what the analysis shows is that the open field, for example, is used by respondents to voice an opinion about a specific survey they were filling in, whereas the contact with the panel management is mostly about the survey process as such. So about the ongoing thing, not about, I didn't like question 3, right? So it makes a difference. Now I can't advance anymore. Let's see. Oh yeah, cool. So, and the other thing is, Sebastian told me he's interested in money. I'm not going to tell you anything about money, because that's too hard a topic for me to do. But I showed you before how many people we are in the team, and now let's translate that to full-time equivalent positions, including research. That's important here. So it's not just the maintenance of the panel, it's also the research we are not supposed to do. That we are, of course, doing. So, yeah, I think I'm not going to read it out. You see it here, right? So for all the parts, survey project management, survey data management, what I told you before, right? You have the numbers here. So you can translate that to what would that cost if you would basically replicate what we are doing to do it here in Spain, right? You know what would be behind those numbers. And then are, of course, the non-personnel expenses, which again depend a lot on your infrastructure in wherever you want to run this. So again, of course, it makes sense to ask what it would cost here, but I tried to mention the main, from my point of view, the main aspects that will cost you larger sums. That is, first and foremost, of course, recruitment and refreshments, incentives, because those you have to pay for every wave. By the way, if you need some research convincing your funders that incentives pay off, there are a lot of GESIS papers on that show exactly that. On the long term, it's cheaper to use incentives than not, right? Because otherwise you would send a lot of letters to people, for example, who never participated, and that costs also a lot of money, right? Survey software is something to consider. So someone now might go, wait a minute, why don't we use open source software? Great idea, still will cost you money because you will need someone to do programming tasks for you. I mean, I encourage the use of open source software, of course. That's, as I said, a great idea, but don't forget you still need someone who is able to adapt it for you. If you go for mixed mode as we do, you have to pay for a field provider who does all this very important steps for you, printing the questionnaire, data input of the questionnaire, sending out invitation, buying stamps, actually, this type of stuff. Then I just told you about panel management. That is important. So you might want to hire a service that actually can react to whatever participants need help with whenever your team is not working. And there are, of course, other software tools which might or might not cost money, such as a project management software and, of course, software for statistical analysis. So since the interruption was not my fault, I take the liberty to talk very quickly about our GESIS panel digital behavioral data sample. So again, just in a nutshell, this combines an online survey, so here we are not speaking mixed mode anymore, and linked data collection of digital behavioral data. It also stands apart from the GESIS Panel.pop in that it is not only probability-based. So it combines different sampling methods like meta sampling, so Facebook, Instagram, but also a dedicated register-based sample and piggybacking approaches. The structure is very similar to the GESIS Panel.pop, so core studies and submitted studies, even though for the moment submissions are only call-based. Again, we established this in 2023, but started with the regular operations last year. and the first regular data release is also planned for this year. And then, and I promise that's only those 2 slides that I have, but I wanted to show you this as well, because this goes into details regarding the sample. So first of all, you will see here in the count line, in the total line, that this panel is somewhat larger, the sample, than for the population sample, which is in part due to the fact that, of course, if you want people to participate in web tracking, a lot of, or only few people will do this. So you need to ask much more people than you want to have in your sample, right? So you see here that about a bit more than a third of those this sample was recruited through Facebook and Instagram, but also this is what EMA stands for. Nearly a quarter was recruited through a dedicated register-based sample, and then we have piggybacking approaches with, among other things, the GESIS panel, but also the general election study and others. And that's already it on that topic. So, short summary. The first thing hopefully is clear by now. We are an open data collection infrastructure for the social science. Open means you can use our data and you're happy to submit your studies to us, and we will field them provided they follow certain very broad rules. We have 2 samples, which I talked about a lot, so I'm not going to read that out again. I focused on the population sample of the GESIS panel, which is operational since 2013 and regular operations since 2014. We have a mix of core and submitted studies. We allow researchers to collect data for free, with very few exceptions. We, again, have a high diversity of topics, and we offer, of course, also high quality data. And if you're interested in COVID-19, in what happens during the pandemic or the effects on people even now, then look in our data. And here you also see the years, I mentioned that before. And actually this number is strong. Of course, we included the instruments from 2020 to 2023 and not 2021, right? Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I found this extremely interesting, and I'm sure many in the audience too. I should mention perhaps that at this institute, we have some much more limited experience with mounting a survey panel. We did it at a regional basis in Andalusia, which is a big region, some years ago, but this experience found premature damage due to funding problems. So what we do now is like the importance of panel management, the resource intensity. We have an inkling on that, and we appreciate the enormous amount of effort that goes into handling something so complex as you're doing there. In Germany, open to researchers from other countries, but collecting data in Germany. I should also mention perhaps that precisely because there is no such public probability-based survey infrastructure in Spain, when we decided we needed to do something in times of COVID, the data collection on the social dimension of COVID, we had to invent a survey procedure on the spot because we couldn't rely on such an infrastructure. We couldn't contract any field work. It was completely impossible to do anything requiring administrative procedures that we would usually use. So we had to invent it, and we did it from the home office. We did it, but it's like something very different from what you were able to do based on this existing infrastructure. Of course, you don't need COVID to prove its worth. You would prove it any time that a research project requires high quality data. So thank you very much for exposing this. And now I won't abuse of my position with the mic to ask questions because I have the opportunity to ask him later. I'll let you do that. So Esther.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think I will have 3 questions in total, and I think all of them are like clarification questions, if I understood it well. So first, wait, what was it? Oh yes, you said that you prefer tested questions, meaning if with my research group, we asked it in the Hungarian context several times, and it shows that answers are reliable, blah, blah, blah. This is what it means. Or maybe, you know, untested questions, relying on tested questions could be a good, you know, improvement of the question. But if I underline this, maybe you accept it on one hand. The second, you showed us that wonderful statistics on the number of on a number of studies, and there, I guess this has mostly financial reasons that the number of longitudinal studies is lower than, because you promised that you won't talk about exact amount of monies, but maybe the related money we can ask about. And third, so this kind of, you know, submitted data collection, do they need to publish the results? So the data sets are also publicly available of those projects of the external projects, let's say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those excellent questions. Shall I answer directly, or do you?
Well, yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I think I'm going to start with the last one. Of course, we have a huge interest in you using the data you collect with us, and we demand it, but we cannot enforce it, obviously. But yeah, we want you to publish your results.
The data.
The data is ours. The data will be published, and there is no embargo at all. So, but still, I'm gonna elaborate on that just for a second, because when I have told that people before, they were like, okay, but it's my project and everyone else gets the data at the same time I do. Yes, but there's one huge difference. You know that we will publish the data. Nobody else knows unless you told them, of course. But still, you know your questionnaire, you can already start to design your analysis routine and so on and so forth. Yeah, but all data that we collect is published in our data files. Okay. Tested questions. Yeah, I mean, as you already mentioned in your questions, we prefer tested questions. Of course, we also then want innovation, and it's natural that not every question can be tested, and especially if you do not have the money to get your question tested in a pre-test lab, then it might be necessary to submit it without a test. Or if you have translated your Hungarian instrument, for example, into German, it might not be tested, right? But it is good if you can show us that the instrument has been tested, and preferably tested not exclusively with samples of students, as it is sometimes done, but for the general population, right? The longitudinal studies, yes. So that is one question, and I'm very happy that it came up because it usually does. It does not have to do anything with costs, because I mean, we have the same costs either way. So it doesn't change anything whether it's a longitudinal or cross-sectional study. But it has to do with the nature of the study, because a longitudinal study will block questionnaire slots, over time. Cross-sectional studies will not. So that is one part of the story, why by nature, it is very likely that there are more cross-sectional studies than longitudinal studies, right? Because with cross-sectional studies, every study counts. And for the longitudinal study, even if it runs over 12 waves, it just counts once as one study and not as 12 cross-sectional studies, right? So that's part of the issue, but I get that you are skeptical. And of course, we would like to have more longitudinal studies. Very happy to hear them. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation, really interesting. And similarly, I have three questions as well, mainly for clarification and just curiosity, actually. You mentioned that just one thing is, for clarification and curiosity is, how do you choose the panelists that actually will be filling online versus that is 75% versus those that actually will be post, that is a 25%. So whether it is themselves selecting it or and then in the presentation where you put the input during an output, I was just curious, you mentioned the quality check coming in the post part, or maybe like after data collection, whereas I would have expected, or maybe it's a cycle ongoing process in quality check of the data during and rearranging your set. I don't know, like just checking that part. And finally, regarding the sensitive variable, if you could expand a little bit more on how you measure it and what that means if you need sometimes to expand the people to the number of participants to have actually more clarity in terms of, it depends on if you use some specific method, that's what I meant. Like unmatched count technique or other specialized questioning techniques, if you use any of those.
Okay, thank you. Again, excellent questions. The first question you practically answered already. I just need to confirm it is self-selection. So people tell us as part of the recruitment interview whether they want to participate online or offline. Of course, we usually do push to web, so we try to convince them to participate online, but there are still people who would not want to do that. And also our suspicion is, but that's rather a topic for the coffee break or dinner, that it's not just about access to the internet as it is often portrayed. There are other things going on, and we are currently looking into that. Quality checks, why were they in the output column? So there I was, or in the post field rather, there I was really referring to checking the data set. So as part of the preparation, of course, there is a check whether there was an error or whatever, all kinds of data checks. If I understood correctly, you were referring to possible adaptations during the field period. So these are very rare. Of course, we would do it if we would see that there's a filter error and it becomes clear or there's some technical issue. Those are really rare, and usually we do not. So we are not actively checking during fielding, but we react, of course, if respondents point us at something. But I would have to check whether that ever came up. Of course, we, as everyone who collects data, we have already once or twice realized after data collection that there was an issue. But yeah. And sensitive variables. So first of all, the nature of sensitive variables, or actually I mentioned something else as first, to find out more about that, it is easiest to look in our code book, because there we have very clear indications which variable is in the standard data set or in the extended data set, right? But to provide some example, we have, for example, information in the data set on the very specific region where people live, on the federal state, but you will not find that in the standard edition, but only in the extended edition. What you find in the standard edition is an indicator whether people live in East or West Germany, something like that. Or other things is, and I think that's what you were referring to with the second part of your question, if we have, for example, open questions, because you can submit an open question to us, but then those answers will not be in the standard edition. So what we usually then want from you in this specific case is, if you want to use the data, you should please code the data, send us the codes, and then we add the codes to the standard edition, not the open answers themselves. Yeah, I hope that answers it.
Okay, thank you very much, Stefan. So very important work and presentation, and also thank you, Sebastian, for having invited you for giving this presentation, because I think it's very relevant to all of us. So staying in this trinity questions, like 3 questions, I would like to have yes, just 3 questions. First of all, I would like to say something about issues that you encountered about selections or inclusion of certain group of people, like young people, immigrant origin people, because like when now we are talking with the survey agencies, there is always this issue for survey agencies, and it's very difficult to reach and keep young people. So just to know if there are some issues that raise over time regarding these 2 groups, so young and immigrant origin people. So the second one is about the use of the panel data, panel survey. So the general question is whether if you offer some training about the use of GESIS panel data, just because I have this kind of perception that since there is very high use of panel data in the field of, like economic sociology, social certification, like SOEP panel data, or this. I have this perception that people that are more involved in the study of attitudes, let's say voting behavior, this political sociology, but yes, this kind of disciplines, yes, they like a lot panel data as an idea, and using like 2 ways data, but without having this way on those of familiarity by using this kind of data, like you have said, that you have indicators of political participation, environmental attitude every year for like very long period. So just to know whether if you offer some training and or if you're thinking about it. And the final one, very easy question, simple. How much interest and as well about application do you receive from foreign people, foreign, not German people? Because I think that, as you said, I totally see your point that if you have a very good research question, a very good research framework, of course, the quality of this data may be better to have bad data in your country in which you have your knowledge. But since it is a German panel, just to know something anecdotal about it.
Yeah, thank you. And as I feared when you said this is going to be a very easy question, that is, of course, the one that is hardest to answer. Because to start again with the last question, we unfortunately do not have the statistics, or we did not have time to analyze that. So because, of course, we could, if we would have time, we have the information, but so far we were not able to look into that. How many people submitted studies who are not affiliated with institutions in Germany, because there are many aspects to that, right? So data collection, or how many people used our data and published on some on it while not being usually doing research on Germany, and so on and so forth. So unfortunately, I cannot give you any numbers. I can tell you that we have, of course, had people who submitted studies who had not used German data before, or of course also of researchers who had not been or who are not associated with institutions in Germany. What our data has been used repeatedly for is also for cross-national research. So someone collected data in France, Italy, the US already on a specific topic and wanted to replicate the instruments to have a point of comparison. Yeah, that's unfortunately all I can say in this regard so far. Then the training question. I could now bore you with a whole other commercial block, but I try to be brief. So no, the GESIS panel does not any training, do any training itself, but our institute actually has a whole department dedicated to that, GESIS training. So we offer summer schools, webinars, on-site trainings throughout the year on a whole bunch of topics, on whatever you're interested in regarding survey research. I'm rather sure we have, or those colleagues have, a webinar or seminar on that already. If not, just drop them an email and suggest it. And there's a high chance they will offer it. And there are definitely also trainings on the use of longitudinal data. And then we also have a new project, really large infrastructure project at GESIS called CODAX. And please don't ask me what the acronym stands for, because I don't remember. But that's basically a group that focuses on data quality and also does training in this regard. And again, they also use, not exclusively, but also longitudinal data. And they actually, for the people in the room or online that are beginning of their careers, they also regularly have calls for visiting scholars, young scholars who want to come to GESIS to work on one or another data quality issue. And they can come to us with all expenses paid, as far as I know. And the last one was regarding the selection biases. So the other obvious one you did not mention is education, besides age and immigration status or origin. Yes, we do have an educational bias, as most surveys have. We do underrepresent migrants, unfortunately. And we also see that our sample gets increasingly older, even though we do refreshments. So of course, the people who are with us for years get older, but also the new people who join. But then again, so does society. But still, it's a valid point. And we are at the moment looking into that, whether with a future refreshment, we actually want to do some kind of oversampling of one or another group. But we just started thinking about that in a structured manner with the statisticians we have at our institute.
Thank you. Should we settle for the 3 times 3, or Alvaro wants to put in 3 more questions here? Okay.
Well, I do have 3 questions, but I'm going to be brief. And I was just wondering, like today we have this meeting in which we are discussing like cross-country equivalences. So even though, for instance, if I want to propose some questions for the GESIS panel, there are some substantive issues there, like not only about what to ask, but also could be the case about how to ask. So is there any kind of provision in that regard, like substantive advice or something like that? Was this an issue in previous experiences?
You promised 2 more?
Well, should we collect 3 more, 2 more, then maybe we have 3 with a mixed, nobody else? Yeah, Manolo, I would have been surprised if you don't have a question.
Bueno, voy a aprovechar para preguntar en español. Relacionado con el sesgo de la muestra, del panel, ¿aplicáis después weighting para corregirlo? Sobre todo el nivel, la educación, ¿no? Puede ser importante. Y la otra, ¿cómo hacéis los cuestionarios? ¿Usáis un método propio o una programación propia o usáis alguna herramienta externa?
Yeah, the second one I didn't get. Or you tell me what it was about.
How do you manage questionnaire implementation?
How do you program the questionnaire?
How do we what?
It's a program.
Program. Sorry. Yeah, sure. Sorry. Yeah, thank you.
I suggest we collect whoever wants to ask something. This is the moment. Then we have a wrap up answer turn and then we go for lunch. So anybody else? Well, I want to press you on cost. You don't have a cost breakdown roughly how much any given GESIS wave would cost if you break down your infrastructure costs and all of the rest. You don't have that cost estimate. If you don't have it, it's probably not high on your mind. You're well funded, right? Because, I mean, if you only take the incentive, that's relatively close to what most non-prop panels would charge for a study. So this incentive alone, what I'm trying to say, it's definitely not cheap, but you can put a number on it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I start with Alvaro's question. So do we have advice on how to ask what? That's the key of your question, if I got it correctly. You have a topic in mind, you're not sure which way to ask it would be appropriate. So, and you can tell me in a second whether I got it wrong. But if I did, I answer my question first. So no, we don't have the capacities to help you out as a team on that front. But again, our institute has a lot of services, and most of them are, at least up to a certain point, free of charge to, again, researchers that are not associated with German institutions too. So there is, for example, a whole group who does consultations, which I do too, but not on questionnaire construction. And you can contact those people and say, okay, that's my idea. That's what I want to ask. They will not design the questionnaire for you. But if you say, I have a very specific question, so these are my 3 options, I'm not sure, there might be this or that going on, then they might be able to help you. We have a pre-test lab, which I would have to ask, but no, I don't have to ask. So they will only test your question versions in German, of course. After thinking, I don't have to ask because they need to have respondents, and I guess not many people could answer in Spanish in Germany. So yeah, long story short, if you need assistance in this regard, just go to the GESIS website. There's a whole contact form on consultations. Put in whatever question you have, And then we will figure out in the back end who can answer you and how. Of course, it can also turn out nobody of us can, because it might be beyond our expertise, but it's always nice to try. So regarding weighting, if I get that, oh no, I promised to give you a chance to tell me whether I got your question right overall. Did I? Did that answer more or less your question? Okay, cool. Regarding question, the question and suggestions regarding weighting. First of all, I'm not at all an expert in weighting. I'm actually as far away as one can be. So I can give you much details, but we do have some weights that are programmed by our statisticians, but those are design weights. So anything beyond that, if you have ideas to weight our data on some specific aspects to correct for biases like education or something like that, you would be encouraged and actually also asked to come up with the weight yourself. And it's not just because it would be really a strain on our resources to provide additional weights. It also because a lot of people use our data for a lot of different purposes, and they might have very different needs in terms of weights. That's why actually we decided not to start down this slippery slope to go too much in that direction. Yeah, Sebastian, I know you want to tell me about costs. I mean, you already pointed out that the costs are something that you can, to a certain extent, calculate based on the information I gave you. If you need more hints in this regard, I would be happy to provide them. But live stream or not, I will not be able to tell you.
Well, he just doesn't want to run the math. Anyway, we'll do that for him. Thank you very much.